Obama, inspired a generation, gave them something to vote for. And this was the 2008 election was the first time in my memory when there was this message that it wasn't just lesser of two evils. It was that you could actually vote for a transformative agenda. And what really resonated, in particular with young people, was the fact that he promised to take the United States on a completely different energy course, economic course. And the Keystone XL pipeline represents the ultimate betrayal of those promises, of those values. This is a $7 billion project that is locking in a dependence on the dirtiest form of fuel. And once you sink that money in, they're going to get that money out. So we're locking in, decades into the future. And that's why it's so important that people have drawn the line and said, we see this as a test. We see this as a test of your value, your ethics, your morals. The tar sands are disastrous for Canadians. They are disastrous in particular for the people living downstream from the tar sands, who are watching their land be poisoned, their water poisoned. And this is why today is a really important day, because it's the Indigenous Day of Action, and there are Indigenous people who are from the area around the tar sands who've come down, and I wanted to be here to support them. But the tar sands have also had an incredibly corrosive effect on Canadian values and Canadian politics, because Canadians really see themselves as being leaders in human rights and international law, and because our country is now defending the indefensible in the form of the tar sands, we are really watching those values betrayed again and again on the international stage. We violated our Kyoto agreement. We violated our Kyoto commitments. Canada signed the Kyoto Protocol, unlike the United States, and yet our emissions went up 30%, and that's largely because of the tar sands. So we now have this total rift between the values that we say we believe in and the actions of our government. And so I think that Canadians have a particular responsibility to try to bring those values back in line and show that there are other models for economic development other than exploiting the dirtiest form of energy imaginable. Our government has started using this phrase ethical oil to describe the tar sands, and it's really an outrage. But in many ways I'm glad that they've raised the issue of ethics, because the tar sands is a deeply ethical and moral issue. It's an ethical and moral issue to people whose land is being destroyed, whose way of life is endangered because they can't live off the land, they can't live off the water in the way they have. It's also a moral and ethical issue because the emissions linked to this incredibly dirty source of fuel creates reverberations around the world. But the people who are feeling the most direct effects of global warming, of climate change, who are most vulnerable to the effects of those emissions, are in the developing world and are least responsible for creating this crisis. So this is a moral and ethical issue, and that's why so many Canadians are here.